in order to dedicate his life to composing and to life. I think so. It's a wonderful place where we live.
Indeed. Thank you. I must apologize for needing to read my presentation. In each of the presentations that I've attended so far in this symposium, new information has been filtered through my thoughts about my own music. And so you can see here in the lecture all the red around here and on the other side. So I'm not going to be able to navigate this just by adding to my own conversation. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone who's involved in putting this symposium together and hosting it, particularly Augustine, Gertrude, and Johannes. And I'm happy to see many of you here whom I met at the 2019 symposium, and especially that I'm reunited here with my dear friends Sergei, Max, Irina, and Andre, the musicians of the Kharkov Guitar Quartet. I didn't think it would be possible. I want to give a special thank you to Agustin Costia Avila, who shared the Kharkiv Guitar Quartet's recording of my composition, Miraz d'Esprit, with the Danish ensemble Cross, with whom he has collaborated. And they invited me to write a composition for them, which I recently composed in a kind of mutating 12 to 18 to 36 to 18 to 12 arc of EDO. The title is Arcturus, Dastgāh-Music. I hope that's a correct Danish pronunciation. Dastgāh-Music is a day star, the star that the sun can't block out. Though the Arcturus was written for Cross Ensemble, it's dedicated to Ukraine, Ukraine being the star, Arcturus. So, guitar sextet. Do you all have a copy of the paper? Since we've already appropriated the term.
Are there any extra copies, actually? Because I think, yeah.
I made 20 years.
Any other extra? Otherwise, maybe you can share with Hans. Is it okay? Yeah.
Can I have?
Just, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Maybe if I leave it here, is it okay?
You can share. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're too popular, Richard.
Guitar sextet. So how many works have been composed for this instrumental configuration? I had to dig around, and my primary and almost sole resource was the repertoire of Cross. And not, of course, transcriptions and a pulled together group of 6 guitarists could play just about anything. Greetings. So I'm wondering, maybe some of you can mention some titles to me, the composers who've written for guitar sextet.
I guess from Frank O'Terry, there is one.
Oh yes?
Electric guitar sextet.
Aha.
Also in 63 EDO.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
So I wrote in 36 division Rubaiyat for 6 guitars, and then not another guitar for 6 electric guitars, but it's gonna be premiered on Sunday actually. But I didn't have money for 6 guitar players, so one pianist will take care of the guitars, and then 2 tonal ones.
I saw the photo.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is one of Elena Rikov actually also made from 2020 for electric guitars. They have like now a sextet, they play also in Darmstadt, and they are building repertoire. Electric guitars with carondoids and this sort.
And the ensemble name?
I don't remember, but I can tell you.
Open source
UFA,
guitars?
UFA sextet.
No, UFA.
Ooh.
Okay.
Sextet, yeah. They are a sextet.
So at that point, with an invitation to write for guitar sextet, I had no commitment at that point to write a microtonal piece, but in a sort of primitive way of thinking of what I might do, many numbers came to mind. 6 guitars, 36 strings, with the possibility of 36 pitches. My obsession with prime number time shaping, macro and micro level, also then immediately hit me with 13, 11, 7, 5. There is a sequence of adjacent primes adding up to 36. 11 and 7 for the 18 data. 3, 3, 5, 3, 2, 2. So already I was thinking of time shaping along with the sonic spectrum possibilities. Next, and you'll see this at the top, where the quarter tone symbol for sharp and flat in fact represents 6th tone. Okay, and in the score itself, that kind of notation is not used. I'll get to that later. 2 strings at normal tuning, 2 a 6th tone low, and 2 a 6th tone high, grouping the guitars in pairs so that the normal pitches were in a different position for each pair, the 6th tone up in different positions. So there was a broad spectrum of range throughout each of the 12 Edo string pairs. And as an afterthought, looking at why did I put 2 of them together at a time, and someone joked with me that maybe it was as an emotional support partner, since they were both going to be negotiating the strings in the same challenging way. Then I had the brainstorm of pitch expansion and contraction, and devised a process for mutating or evolving the sonic spectrum of the piece. Many years ago, back in the 1970s, one of my mentors was the composer Dane Rudhyar, who many of you might have encountered as a Jungian astrologer rather than as the composer that was the center of his interest. He was a member of the early 20th century American avant-garde, which also included George Antheil and the Ukrainian-American Lev Ornstein. And these were the 3 lions of New York avant-garde music scene. Ultra-dissonant music, not microtonal, but an ultra-dissonant vocabulary that Rudhyar described as inclusiveness. He rebelled against the exclusiveness of meter, the bondage to 3/4 and 4/4 time, dragged out from the Baroque court dance all the way into the 20th century, and then also the inclusiveness and democratization or socialization of pitches, whereby there's not a hierarchy of a tonic, a dominant, a subdominant, and these are to be considered passing tones or visitors or intruders that either have to be sent away after their temporary visit or converted into one of the 7 tones of a scale. And so already Rudyard in his last years was regretting that he hadn't made his way into the microtonal spectrum, because it would have been the perfect place to fulfill the ideas that he was proposing in the 1920s, which were effectively crushed by the arrival of Copland and his Boulanger acquired neoclassicism. Well, so I began the work in 12/8, available chromatically on 12 of the guitar strings in each tuning. So there were 3 12-pitch sets or transpositions for the first 12/8 section. Then I proceeded to effect a transition into the 18-pitch set. And being aware that my tuning configuration also provided 6th tone transpositions, it was necessary to replace 6 of the normally tuned pitches of the 12, that being one of the whole tone scales in the 12, with 2 microtonally tuned pitches, resulting then in 6 from each tuning to produce an 18-pitch 3rd tone scale. So as you see on the handout page, that scale is a succession of normal pitch, lowered pitch, raised pitch, normal pitch, skipping the half steps. Well, you all know this already. That's why I'm going to stick to my primitive desire to evolve. So in 1880, I also extracted and explored 2 of its 4 9-pitch sets of 2/3 tones. Is that a good terminology? A 9-pitch set of 2/3 tones? Where do you go for this slightly larger interval? Are there names?
I like your name, the 2/3 tones.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Then came the transition to the 36 concerning this pitch what is it, an evolution, an expansion, a mutation? Could it be considered some kind of modulation? Again, I don't have a terminology for this ever-changing vocabulary. And then towards the end of the piece, at around the 2/3 mark, it process reverses itself, as I mentioned before, ultimately reducing the content to a single unison note, concluding the work. It happens to have been the pitch that opened the work at the very beginning. It was E5, actually. So the other thing is working in this vocabulary, in this gradually mutating vocabulary. What about formal structure? The old form versus content issue. It was rather perplexing, and I'm reminded of that Gilbert and Sullivan song from the Mikado, "Make the punishment fit the crime." You know, there has to be some working for me in a new vocabulary to also find a structure that supports it as it deserves. I'm back in my student days when for the first time I heard an atonal work in an 18th century fugue form. I felt a major perceptual disconnect, a kind of aesthetic vertigo. And I didn't want to be responsible for birthing another such, I just couldn't stand the idea of hearing fugal structure in an atonal vocabulary. So in some areas I provided structures in the piece in response to the melodic, harmonic, rhythmic material. In other areas, molded the material into a pre-existing structure based upon those I had devised for earlier content in order to put a limit to the degree of formal variety, because most of my music is very formally episodic, you know, and does benefit from having some kind of cross-referential unity to it. So would my form and content interaction become a yin-yang for the listener? This is what I'll be curious to discover when the full Arcturus is eventually performed. What I have from the cross ensemble is a home recording of the middle third of the piece. This is towards the end of the transition from 12 into 18, and goes all the way through until the 18 arrives at the 36. So here is that excerpt from the middle of the piece. So, and more to come, hopefully soon. I need to talk about the technical performance issues given the new structuring of the guitar format. In effect, the players have 3 two-string instruments on one instrument body. Regarding the challenges of learning and rehearsing and performing Arcturus, this new triplex guitar, you might call it, requires a lot more lateral string-to-string movement of the hand, just because you're not going to be staying on a single 12 Edo string for very long, and certainly not moving from one fret to another on that string. There's a notation issue in particular, whereas when I first asked my friends Max and Irina from the Kharkiv Guitar Quartet to take a look at my first sketches, they discouraged me from using little triangular pyramid-shaped note heads for the 6th tone higher and the 6th tone lower, suggesting that what was really necessary was to identify the string number in virtually every instance. So a new reading challenge comes along where the players are relying a lot more on which string they move to next. I then went about testing distances where there's a choice of playing the note on either of the 2 strings for the next pitch, which one is readily reachable and which one is impractical. Where it seemed you could easily play it on both, then it goes to the next level of the performers deciding what timbre they would like to use at that point, the timbre of the string, the timbre of the fret distance, etc. I really would like to ask Max and or Irina if they could comment a little bit, since they're quite well acquainted with this piece now.
You already, Richard, told about main things that we discussed with you about fingering, and I must say that main difficulty for guitar player is to refuse to use their fingering shapes models while you're reading the score, because as you know, guitarists are heavily rely on these fingering models, and Scordatura is always uncomfortable for this, and when you have every note with exact string, it must be learned only this way, and sometimes there is a big wide gap between one position and another. You must play something like that. And another thing that I think is challenging for a performer for ensemble is to connect these lines, these single notes in a line. when it is a transition from one guitar to another, like hoquet technique, you know, from Middle Ages, and this hoquet technique must be very, very precise, because a guitar always struggles a little bit because it has a sharp attack, always sharp attack, and playing on time, you know this joke about how two guitarists can play in the same time. You must shoot one of the guitarists and it will be okay. So sorry for that, but it is almost true. It's hard to make these lines like smooth, you know. Maybe Irina can add something.
No, I can't add something else. And I think that the most difficulty is the fingering, because our traditional way of fingering thinking doesn't work at all in this piece. But I want to say to Richard that I like this score, even if we can't play all the score together, you know, because we revised it with Max only.
Yeah.
And I hope that sometimes we should find 2 more guitarists for playing this beautiful piece. And the transition from the 12th Edo to 18 and then to 36 and then in the back way, it sounds amazing, I think.
Yeah, and one thing I must add that this piece is really unique, and I hope that someday we will bring Arcturus to Ukraine because it belongs it spiritually. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that. The members of the Kharkiv Guitar Quartet have been involved in virtually every one of my pieces involving guitar, and you know, for the one that was performed last night, the Mirage d'Esprit, they're the other 4 composers of the 5 of us for that piece. They gave me a little more leeway this time with the 6th. To see if I could swing, I think. Another technical discovery is that I quickly realized that the necessary lateral string-to-string shifting, coupled with a new variation of standard fret shifting technique, discouraged traditional scalar melodic activity. So my whole experience of melody now was not readily available on any one or pair of the guitars. And what then happened was I said, well, what kind of melodies are more readily navigatable given the 2-2 and 2 tunings? And suddenly, you know, I was finding melodies that I never would have thought of before. You know, almost like when you do something with a chance operation, you know, you set up this pattern and there they are. They're just begging to be realized sonically. But then again, and Max did make a reference to it, is that, well, yes, but you could still do your other melodies, but they had to be passed from player to player. You know, you see, you know, that this pair has the upper 2 strings, this pair of guitars has the middle, etc. So that you really can get anywhere melodically as long as you use this hocket term. So I got fascinated with hocket, you know, coming out of the Notre Dame Ars Antiqua, you know, and appropriated by the early 14th century avant-garde in instrumental music. But then, you know, in recent history, then I found these examples Louis Andresen's Hoketus, the Robert Fripp and Adrian Bellew duet in the album King Crimson. Of course, in terms of indigenous music, the Indonesian gamelan, African babenzeli pygmy music, Andean panpipes, where you have 2 rows of pipes, which are different scales, but then interact. And I listened to this to confirm it, but Duke Ellington's Dragon in Brass, which uses Hackett in his jazz orchestra. Let's see, how much time do we have here?
Well, 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. So
we are actually entering the questions time in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to I'll take 2 of those minutes. Okay.
You can take 4.
Parts 1, 2, and 3 of this actual 4-part structure has an abstract opening section followed by a folkloric sounding theme and its exploration. Then there's a disruption, an intense, rather chaotic conflict episode that destabilizes the tuning and launches us into the transition to the next pitch vocabulary. Part 3's disruption episode takes in part 3 the disruption episode is a structured improvisation. Part 4 dispenses with that earlier format. And last of all, there will be a second version of this piece in which the ambient electric guitar textures of a friend of mine from San Francisco, Bruce Anderson, will be interpolated into the silences and filtered subliminally into the acoustic guitar texture. We're going to launch into that integration in the fall of this year. So, any questions, or if you'd like to hear this little 3 minutes again, we can give it one last listen.
Yes.
Please.
Thank you, Richard, and especially thank you for the warm words. Yes, spoken our friends from Ukraine, and with the connection with the hope we will hear this piece one day in Ukraine all together. That's what we
Yes.
And I think really it would be best to hear again some parts of this piece, no?
Okay, we could do one more time.
Perhaps there will be some questions afterwards.
I would like to mention something. Richard presented 2 years ago on the symposium the piece played by Kharkiv Guitar Quartet yesterday, and played also 2 years ago. There's a lecture about Mirage d'Esprit, and it's on the YouTube channel of the International Ecumenic Society. So he gives a whole lecture about it if you're interested.
Some question, Richard?
Yes.
Okay, a question from another Richard.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I really appreciate what you were doing with pitch because it's very subtle and actually, second listening, you heard so much. But I wanted to ask you about non-pitch material because it seems to be a real feature of your guitar writing. There's this sort of, there's a lot of tension and a lot of energy comes from the non-pitch sounds, which seems to provide a structure for things.
Well, they carry most of the identification of the prime number time shaping, for one thing. The other thing is that this overwhelming 36 strings. I had the sense that I had a little orchestra, and so the orchestral concept then sort of begged for a broadening of timbre that the percussion sound provided.
Okay. Yeah. But does it sort of get you out of corners where the fingering's awkward and the lines going in a particular shape, so anybody can do a percussive sound?
Well, in retrospect, I would hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I also wanted to let the guitars breathe in terms of just transitioning to being percussion non-pitched sounds. Yes.
Is there anyone else? No, I have a question about the compositional idea behind it, because you have this kind of sets of 3 sets of 2, and like SSC guitars 1 and 2, and 2 pitches in common, while the others not. And I wanted actually to ask you if you had a general harmonic idea. If you composed it sound-wise, how the harmonies would be, and then you translated that in 6 different instruments. Do you understand the question?
Yes, I do, and I would say that was an exploration for me. I didn't start out with a decision, and so I felt that I was harmonically finding my way. The utilization of a folk tune as the second section of the first 3 parts kind of gave me a harmonic anchor, which then that harmony would broaden when it appeared in the 18 section, and would broaden even further. In some cases, it was really just like an enlargement of the harmonies that appeared in the first part, which of course we didn't get a chance to hear, and which I haven't actually acoustically heard yet myself. But I do try to establish, a harmonic structure within the 12, which then is mutated along with all the other elements in the later parts. So when it's done, I hope we'll all be able to give it a listen, and because I'd love to have feedback, and I don't think that just listening to the middle even explains why the middle is what it is.
Do you have like soundings for you?
No.
I know.
No. But I can tell when it's not the sounds that I want to hear. Not that I have that microtonal skill so honed, but I hope soon. The sextet just had 2 rehearsals for this little part, and they're enthusiastic about getting it performed. So hopefully by the fall. Thank you.
Well, we will keep the impressions of the music, and we're going on the program now. Is a member of the International Academic Music Society, and I'm glad to present you now Martin Wood. He's from Austria. He's been born in Vorarlberg. In Dornbirn. Nicht for Dornbirn. Poems is a good from Vorarlberg, and he studied classical guitar, electroacoustic music, and harmonic basic research in Vienna, and works as a guitar teacher now, and had his coming out as a composer 5 years ago with a CD, Versöhnung, Leise Records, and in 2021, featuring König Quartet with Sylvie Lacroix and others. He organizes small concert series, live on sound, that has different meanings. It's sound in English, and sound in Austrian is something very different.
Yes, that means down under.
And he is teaching in Krems and Danube, and he invented some instruments like the electroscheit, and he is addition to that, he is a band leader of the band Brennstein. And Martin will speak today about Günther Rabl's composition Landschaft with Pianist.
Every composition of the Austrian electroacoustic composer Günther Rabl indulges in adventurous tunings, and today I choose Landschaft with Pianist, Landscape with Pianist. The name is because it consists of a tape part, the landscape, which can be performed alone, and it leaves space for a wandering pianist, means improvising pianist. Before I begin to talk more, I will play the beginning of the piece.
So I put it to the maximum.
Can you hear it?
Or should we put the big box, this louder?
Yeah.
Because if it's an orchestral piece, or?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we'll stop it at the moment. Can you stop it?
What's the shortcut?
Go back to quick time.
It's okay, you don't have to know because let's see what it shows. turn out the sound, wait.
Yeah, now I
Okay,
turn
take it
off
out.
this one, and then we have this going.
Okay,
So, and now
check. Okay, this should be okay. And then we have some sound. Wait.
Oh, that's a lot better. Back to the beginning. That's the first 2.5 minutes. It's about the exposition of the material. And I will apologize too, I have to read because I'm not used to speak in English, so I could lose track very easily. In 1986, Alexander Pereira, then director of the Musikverein in Vienna, invited Friedrich Gulda to, as we would say today, curate a concert series covering the current musical output in Austria. Since Gulda knew not only Rabl's work as a double bass player, but also his electroacoustic work from the beginning, he asked Rabl to contribute. After considering several options, Rabl decided to compose a new piece for the concert. Sketches on the compositional process are rare, because at that time the composer lived in an old school building in the region of Waldviertel in Lower Austria, where he had attached wrapping paper on the walls of the studio to make his sketches. This is lost. All that is left is about 50 pages in a journal. Some of them deal with sound processing, some of them with structure and form, and some of them with pitches. Rabl's technical setup, besides a pocket calculator at that time, consisted of 2 mono-stereo tape machines and 1 4-channel tape machine. Mayhag filters, they are well known via Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, and a Studer mixer. His longtime collaborator Georg Danschul built for him a ring modulator, frequency shifter, 2 mathematically exact distorters, and 2 vari-speed modules for the monostereo machines to precisely control the tape velocity and thus achieve the correct pitches. Here you can see picture 1. Yes. No. This one.
Yes.
And what is make the window bigger? Just like
You
tying.
can press the green one.
The green one, okay.
The green? Press the green?
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
Can you see it? Yes.
A, B, and C go on.
ABC, and then there are numbers. Here you have a list of the factors to adjust the tape velocity for all 60 pitches in floating point numbers, but often he omitted the comma. Octaves up and down were a reliable standard feature of the tape machines. And I said tape velocity for all 60 pitches, which is not exactly correct, because the numbers in squares represented pitches of 12 tone equal temperament. They only appear in the piano, not on tape. The remaining 48 pitches are assigned to 3 different tapes. Can I just...
You go up to the corner.
Yes.
Up, not this corner, the other. Yeah. And you press again green. And then you
Next.
exit from it.
And green again? No, that's the same.
Yeah, just go.
Do you want to close it?
I want the next one.
Just minimize it. Press the yellow, then
Yellow.
orange, yes. And
Oh, okay. And then green again?
yeah.
I found it. The remaining 48 pitches are assigned to 3 different tapes. That means 20 EDO minus 4 piano pitches for tapes A, B and C. So where's the line? These are the omitted piano pitches, the ones in square before. And each 20 EDO starts 1 scale degree of 60 EDO apart. And then again. And this is a 20 EDO scale of the tape C without the 12 pitches of the piano. As you can see, this generates 2 step sizes. The small step with 3 EDO degrees and the big step, the large step with 6 EDO degrees. And just as each subscale was assigned to 1 tape, each tape was assigned to 1 loudspeaker in the mixdown. This leads to, as one might say, to a kind of hocket throughout the composition. The filters, too, were set according to the underlying pitch grid. Thus the sounds with characteristic filtering are spatialized in the same way.
Give me a minute. Can open the just okay.
And then I just can
Yeah, you can
continue.
scroll. Exactly.
That's better.
Alright. Amazing. And then you can.
Thanks. And here, although we've had that before, we are clearly dealing with 60 EDO and not 60 TET, and you should never mistake them. There are fractions next to the list, and Rabl said that he uses the ratios for orientation, not the approximated ratios for orientation. And by the way, one example for sketches on sound is found on the bottom. You see volume levels and minimal difference, but they are designed to make the fabric more sculptural. And Landschaft is divided into 9 sections with subdivisions. This is not exactly at the end of the process, but near the end. Concerning his first, these sections are not pre-constructed, they evolve from the sounds that are used. Concerning his first electroacoustic composition, Mugel entsteigt, Rabl writes, the necessity to name sounds, to talk about them, brings them to a new life. They grow into an order, not only of abstract principles of form, but also of a fantastic nomenclature. In the process of composing, a mythology arises that connects the sounds, wrested from their natural habitat and electronically processed, with the realm of thought. To connect them with the realm of thought also means to structure them by intuition or construction. And/or construction. 2 examples for sketches on structures. On the right, you see 2 duration rows. One derived from the 12th root of 2, starting from the same number, 57, and the other one from the 6th root of 2. The numbers represent tape length in centimeters. On the left, you see a closed cycle of part permutations, which meant cutting a lot, but if he had only made permutations, not parts, but only numbers, it would have meant even more cutting the tape. None of the 9 sections is composed to explicitly be joined by the wandering pianist, or explicitly not to be joined. The only space that is left for the piano is in the omitted 12 pitches. Now let's listen to a part of the composition with piano. Best the same, the beginning, but with Günther improvising on piano. Günther was asked to supply 3 short piano improvisations as basic material for electroacoustic transformation. And these 3 improvisations were released as on CD on Günther Rabl's label Canto Crudo, as well as the other 3 CDs we've already heard excerpts from. So I will try to play piano piece A. That works. Let's move a little bit forward. Play again. improvisations, he moves also into the piano and plucks the strings or plays flageolet. And here on this one you see the strange signs that is his notation for different tape transformations. Due to technical reason, there is no material available to retrace these technical transformations by ear, so we could listen to them, but he gave me from the previous piece sticks where it's better documented, because this landscape he had only half a year to produce, and it was very short time for this amount of work. So I will play some short examples of tape transformations for the previous piece. It starts with cello triads in 18 EDO, recorded with multi-track technique. Frequency shift up is the next one. This is speed up. Thanks, yes. Okay. Like, yes, we can omit the last one, because you've heard, and it's obvious that the first one was in 18 EDO, but each transformation blows the system. The transformation has nothing to do with the system that was at the beginning. So you have to either decide to not take care of any system and go with whatever, or you have to find a system to structure the sounds when they have blown the system. So, well, we could omit that perhaps because it's the... No?
It's this one?
No, not that. But
take the time you need.
We need this picture, please. 8. No, 8. Yes. Here on top you see the tones that are plugged inside the piano in all of 3 of the piano improvisations of the basic material. And on the right, on the left you see 16 pitches, so 16 tones, 9 different pitches, of the 12-tone system, and they are in the middle column. They are moved, they are transposed into neighboring degrees of the 20 EDO, so that they are now proud members of 20 EDO. Before they were, yeah.
Next picture.
Yes, please. Here you see the transposition factor, the scale degree of what you've just seen in 6 EDO, and scale degree in 20 EDO. And as I said before, each 20 EDO is assigned to one tape. So this example, which I couldn't detect in the piece, but it's one of the predecessors of what is heard in the end, this would not make any hocket. It's just on tape B. And you see in the cent list that every 5 steps of 60 cent you get to a piano interval, like a minor third. So next picture, please. Another interesting page of the sketchbook dealing with pitches. You see a row of 12 pitches. I mean the numbers 1481, 1231, and in the 5th line it is again 1481, and it's, you see the factors transposition up and down tape, and yeah, on closer examination, next picture please, it turns out that these pitches are all part of the 15 EDO scale that begins one scale, no, I have to say 2 scale degrees on the 2nd degree of the underlying 60 EDO, and not on the same, not on the same tape. I wrote a speaker, and you see, you could call it a phrase, but it's like ABC going around. Next picture, please. That's the notation, classical notation with cent deviations. It repeats, I didn't write it again. It's now we need an audio sample, which it is called down. Oh, Doodle Dude 15. It's not his name, that's my name. But you will hear it. That's what comes out of these numbers that you have seen before. And then I thought, well, of course 40 cent, but it's so fast, it's unaccompanied. Do you hear the difference? Well, you do. Please do the 12. That's in 12 TET. I guess the difference is clearly audible. Next picture, please. Oh no. No. I said it wrong. We need an audio example. It is in Landschaft, and it's in minute 1945. That's what you hear of that in the composition. So we've had 12 EDO in the omitted pitches, 15 EDO in the previous example, and 20 EDO in the first. And I asked Günther why he did not prefer 72 EDO, and he said that he decided after a time of experimentation and consideration that 60 EDO fits the requirements best. In the liner notes on the CD it is referred to the wind scene at the end, which contains a cluster of all 60 pitches. All 3 of Günther's piano improvisations were taken and cut into 5 pieces of the same length. These 5 were layered at 5 different tempi, meaning scale degrees of 60 EDO. Thus, all in all, 60 pitches, or I should say pitch classes, appear. The resulting sound subsequently was filtered and spatialized live while being recorded on tape. Obviously, here the rule of assigned and omitted pitches is suspended. So now we please meet Landschaft on minute 30.
This one, right?
This one.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. 13.
No, 3, 0. No, I mean
30.
30,
Sorry.
yes. Of that. In the late 70s, as double bass player, Günther Rabl had a trio with Friedrich Gulda on clavichord and recorder, and Ursula Anders drumming and singing. She later taught singing here at the Mozarteum. They play so-called free, or probably more apt, at least at that time, non-idiomatic improvisation. The trio was active from 1977 to 1980. And since I do only have a CD of that, and as Augustine told me, a CD doesn't work, I will only tell you, because my impression, it would have been interesting, because the double bass plays in this excerpt that I would have liked to play 17 EDO, and the clavichord sometimes adjusts with clavichord intonation to what double bass plays. But my impression was and still is that what they have played in the 70s by free improvisation was later formalized and put into a proper composition by Rabl, by means that I've talked about a little bit, and the composer agrees with that. So, as we all know, the musical idea shapes the use of the musical material, and Günther Rabl applies the underlying 60 EDO pitch grid in a way that affects inevitably pitches using the full scale and subscales, timbre by applying the pitch grid to filter frequencies, and spatialization by assigning pitches to tapes and tapes to loudspeakers, this kind of hocket. This shapes the composition, and in combination with the elaborate use of duration and rhythm and subtle instrumentation, leads to the intangible yet clear impression of the music. So this sounds like a Navid.
Thank you, Eleni, thank you, Hans, for the technical help, and thank you for the analysis, which I think is just incredible, but you managed it, to get that out.
Yes, I couldn't believe when I saw 50 pages with numbers that I
And with
understand
numbers,
something.
yes, and the length of the tapes and
Yes.
such analysis is probably made to be made.
May I have a question?
Yes.
Would it be possible to recreate or re-perform the piece?
The piece exists.
As also the tapes are still
The tape is
still working and
still. I guess that he has a digitalized version
okay.
now.
That's good.
We will play that in my hometown, not hometown, but where I live in Krems, in autumn, and I will try to be a wandering guitarist. So I cannot play, and I do not want to play like Günther, like this late romantic Scriabin type of music. I'm looking for something different.
And I'm sorry, you just gave me another question because I was asking myself, maybe I misheard, but how was he like walking around? Or
No, it's just the metaphor. That's
okay,
the landscape and.
I imagined like he had like 12 pianos.
No. Just he has
that
no.
sounded really
He has no preconceived
It was a
path,
good
but just wanders
okay,
as he likes.
okay. So it's one piano.
Yes.
Okay.
Piano has wheels, but it doesn't move.
Thank you for that. I'm wondering, were there any aesthetic parameters provided to Mr. Günther for what his improvisation would contain?
I do not believe. I do believe that he got the piece and listened to it several times and made his experiments. But it is the difference between the basic recordings for transformation and what he actually played as pianist on stage is quite obvious, because in the basic recordings he played, he left space and waited, and when he was in the landscape, I guess he had the fear of being overwhelmed by the landscape. It sounds like that. But I don't think that the composer said to him, here like that and here like that.
He visited the Scriabin 7th Sonata landscape briefly there.
No, he was accustomed to that.
Yes.
So, I think we should discuss a long time about this kind of composition, but we can continue afterwards, and we have to continue our program. And thank you, Martin. Thank you all.
Thanks for
Come to Navid Bargrizan. Navid Bargrizan has been born in Hamburg, in Germany, and he is an assistant professor of music at East Carolina University. He taught previously at the University of Florida, Texas, and Valparaiso, and received MA and BD degrees in musicology, composition, and art history from the University of Hamburg here and the University of Florida. Navid's articles he wrote on diverse aspects of the 20th century music are published in USA, Canada, and in diverse European countries, and he has presented his research at several international conferences, like our conference here. Yes, he has published several works and recordings under Rabl and Rabl labels, and the Mahur Institute and the Edition Salzburg published Navid's compositions. Primarily focused on experimentation with microtonality in acoustic and electronic contexts, and even with Arab music and systems. And he was a recipient of postdoctoral fellowship and got prizes for compositions, and a very successful composer, not only in USA. I will speak about his composition, and it's in a connection to Hamburg, as you know, and we will tell now. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Johannes, for this introduction, and Augustine and other colleagues at the Ecumenical Institute for the invitation. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for your patience for the very last paper at this presentation at this conference. I'm going to talk to you about, selfishly, about a piece of mine titled Kupferteich that I composed for solo viola, and it was commissioned and composed for, dedicated to Professor Manfred Stanke in 2019. Fortunately, recorded by Manfred in 2020 in Hamburg, and I will play for you several sections of the recording. But sort of intertwine multiple sort of layers of microtonality, including just intonation and Dastgāh-Music from the Persian classical music, as well as Scordatura. And since I know that I'm composing this piece for, I would say, a microtonal music guru, such as Professor Stanke, I sort of felt the need to push that as much as I could, and was fortunate that Manfred liked the piece and performed the piece. Now, what I'm having on this slide, the very last line says that there I forge a hybrid melodic harmonic structure. It's nothing really too complicated. It's a term that Professor Stanke coined several years ago, and it basically refers to his own, I would say, varied but a consistent static approach to microtonality. And he explains mellow harmony. So that's a word that I came up with, I'm quoting Manfred, to denote the interrelationships of vertical and horizontal pitch organization within an open microtonal field. By definition, this field is open to every aspect of pitch organization. Interval relationships may exist within this field regardless of whether or not they also relate to other, perhaps older forms of melodic harmonic relationships. So basically it refers to a flexible approach to microtonality, I would say. It can integrate any element. It can take impression from any musical culture or any scale or any intonational practices. That's why I followed that lead, basically, and intertwined Persian classical music and sort of approach to just intonation and a Scordatura in this piece. Now, the mellow harmonic structure in Kupferteich, as I just mentioned, consists of three layers. An innovative microtonal scale that Professor Stanke himself has developed, and it uses overtones from two overtone series at the same time. I'm going to show you the scale in a second. It also borrows melodic fragments approximated from Dastgāh-Music, a modal system in the Persian classical music. Accordingly, it also builds on the idea of drone strings that we have in several Persian or Middle Eastern musical traditions, instruments. You might know tar and sitar. There are a lot of drone strings that they just function as, I would say, in order to enrich the musical texture, they are hit while other notes are fretted, basically. So I do have the drone function adapted for viola in this case, and of course Scordatura based on a just intonation minimal tuning. In the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to explain to you these three layers. It was shortly about my static approach. Now I go sort of deeper into music theoretical aspects of that. Now, as an introduction, to give you a sense of how the piece sounds, I'm going to play you a short section and then start with the first layer of mellow harmonic structure. What you hear right now starts from the very last measure on the screen with the time signature 1-4. The very first layer is the scale that, as I explained to you, Manfred Schranke himself developed, and I based this piece based on this particular scale. As you can see on the screen, it's based on harmonics from two harmonic series at the same time. At the very high level, you see it says Auf C, and you see the number of the harmonics or notes based on C fundamental, right? So the very first note, the very first C is the 8 overtone based on a C fundamental, and then the third pitch, D, is the 9th fundamental based on a C overtone, and so forth. Below that, you see Auf G, that shows which of these tones is based on overtone series of G fundamental. For instance, you can see that the second pitch, a C sharp lowered by 47 cents, almost a quarter tone, is the 11th harmonic in a G fundamental scale, basically a just tritone, which compared to equal temper tritone is about a quarter tone lower, and so forth. And then at the bottom, you see the cent intervals between each of the tones of this scale. Now, this scale was developed by Manfred. It was supposed to be used originally to dedicate a piano, to be tuned based on this scale. And this commission that Manfred got to his some of his friends and previous students and colleagues like myself was supposed to be written for that particular piano-tuned according to this scale. But that plan did not work. That's why he asked me to compose a piece for viola in this case. Manfred, as you might know, is retired